Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Good evening. Tonight is the GLRA's Clean Energy Seminar Series, and tonight our speaker is Julie Baldwin. Julie is the manager of Renewable Energy Section, the Electric Reliability Division, Michigan Public Service Commission, and also GLRA's recipient of the 2020 McCoy Award, Leadership Award, that is given to women in Michigan who have displayed outstanding leadership in clean energy. I'm your host, Mark Clevey. I'm the Vice President of Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, and our financial sponsor tonight is Ken Zabar of Harvest Energy. We are celebrating our 30-year anniversary this year. We were formed in 1991, and we continue to be supported by our members to educate and advocate for renewable energy in the Great Lakes, which is why our dues are so important to us. You can help our GLRA, can help us continue our work in a number of ways. Number one, you can renew your membership. And John is, if you're on our system, you'll be getting regular announcements about renewing your membership when it becomes due. You can also be a financial sponsor. For example, sponsoring a local teacher or a local student to join as members of GLREA. You can help us grow our membership by encouraging others to join and become a whole part of the whole solution by joining GLREA. And lastly, as John mentioned, you can make a financial donation to GLREA to support our work. You can do that by contacting John Freeman, and he'll probably be able to direct you better as to how to do that. A check to John always works. Our Clean Energy Series covers topics of particular interest to clean energy users, businesses, advocates, stakeholders all around the state. Seminars include a content ranging from technology to business to public policy issues. The first 3 months of each year will be dedicated to a status update on clean energy in Michigan from the perspective of the industry, electric utilities, and the state government. Our CES is a Zoom event. It's always held on the second Thursday of the month from 7 to 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Our questions related to what we're doing here should be directed to me. My email is there, mclevey123@gmail.com. We ask that you also remember to mute yourself and hold all questions until the end of the presentation. You can raise your hand under reactions. It'll show up on your picture and it'll put you in the queue. And I'll call on you to ask your question. This is they can't see it very well, but we have scheduled these CES sessions for the entire year now. And we also are scheduling some into 2022 now. So these are robust sections. And again, in the beginning of the year, we'll take a snapshot of where we've been, where we are, where we think we're going. And then follow-on sessions will cover topics of interest of how do we move the solar ball or move the solar train, speed up the solar train. We have a new metaphor because of Julie you'll hear about now. How do we speed up the solar train going forward? It's my sincere pleasure to welcome Julie Baldwin, the Michigan Public Service Commission, as tonight's speaker. Julie's presentation tonight is entitled The Mpsd and the Clean Energy Train. Clean energy train is an apt metaphor for the evolution of renewable energy in Michigan. After more than 100 years since its discovery by Albert Einstein and 60 years since President Harry Truman in his 1952 Resources for Freedom report urged that solar energy be rapidly developed in the United States. Roughly 25 years later, the clean energy train finally started down the tracks with Michigan's own President Gerald R. Ford's 1975 Energy Policy and Conservation Act, which called for a dramatic increase in the use of solar energy as a way to achieve energy independence by 2012. In 1978, Governor Milliken's High Technology Task Force called upon the state to start laying tracks for the clean energy train as an effort to diversify Michigan's economy. 43 years later, Michigan is still heavily dependent on fossil fuels as it grapples with the existential risks of climate change. Tonight's presentation will complete a 3-month-long framing of clean energy in Michigan, again, from the perspective of the solar energy industry, electric utilities, and the state government. Future seminars will address how, when within this framework, the clean energy train can be brought up to full speed. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Julie Baldwin. I will stop sharing. Julie, you can click yours on and take over the train. There we go.
All right, great. Well, thanks a lot, Mark. And I'd like to thank GLREA for inviting me to come and speak tonight. I love talking to GLREA. The title of my talk is the Mpsd and the Clean Energy Train, and it really does feel like a journey. And the Clean Energy Train just feels like what we're doing right now. And I really appreciated Mark's introduction where he talked about how people have been working on laying the tracks for this clean energy train for a long time. But I think we're at the point now where there's no going back. So I work at the Michigan Public Service Commission, and that is a state utility regulatory agency. And we have 3 commissioners who are pictured on the screen, and all 3 of these commissioners were appointed by Governor Whitmer. And you can see our mission statement below, which was recently updated. And it really relates to providing safe, reliable, and accessible energy and telecommunications services. That's really at reasonable rates. That's really the focus of the commission. So Mark and I exchanged several emails to figure out what I should talk about. And based on our communication, this slide basically boils down what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'd like to start with a snapshot of where we are from the Mpsd standpoint in our clean energy journey and the Mpsd's role, and then how GLREA members can get involved. And in my opinion, the clean energy train is unstoppable. Now I'm going to talk about where we are on our clean energy journey. The nation's energy mix is undergoing a major shift away from coal and moving more toward natural gas and renewables. And you can see from this slide that in 2007, the black part of the bar shows that Michigan's fuel supply mix for electricity generation was nearly 70% coal. And then moving forward to 2019, which is the most recent data we had, the coal portion of our supply mix is only about 35%. So that is progress. And while natural gas did increase, you can see that the renewable part, the green part of the bar, increased also. And I've been working on renewable energy since about 2008. And granted, I know there are many people in GLREA who have been working on renewable energy and been true believers for decades and decades and decades, and have helped get us where we are today. But the major events in recent times that have contributed to growth in renewable energy are the 2008 package of energy bills, which included Michigan's 10% by 2015 renewable portfolio standard, and our very first net metering program and energy efficiency program. And these laws were revised in 2016, and we ended up with a 15% by 2021 renewable portfolio standard. And the net metering program was reworked, and now it's called the Distributed Generation Program. And we still have energy efficiency, and the 2016 energy laws also added something called integrated resource planning that I'll talk about later. And it also added a little bit about PURPA, which is Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act. And that is a federal law, but the state utility commissions have a big role in implementing PURPA. And then finally, the big thing that happened last year was Governor Whitmer issued an executive directive with a goal to have Michigan reach economy-wide carbon neutrality by 2050. And before most people got on this Zoom call, we were talking a little bit about President Biden's infrastructure proposal, because it includes a clean energy standard, which would require utilities to achieve 100% clean power, that includes nuclear, by 2035. So that is huge. We'll be watching that and see what happens. And when the right policies are in place, renewable energy can grow tremendously. This chart shows what happened after the Renewable Portfolio Standard was enacted in 2008. You can see that during 2009 and 2010 and 11, there wasn't a lot of new renewable energy that came online because these projects had a couple-year lead time. But starting in 2012, a tremendous amount of renewable energy has been built and developed in Michigan to meet the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And the blue part of these bars represents wind, and yellow is solar. And you can see that wind has been the primary resource, the go-to resource for utilities to meet the RPS, but solar is growing quickly and has reached price parity with wind. We expect to see a lot more solar going forward. Oh, and I also wanted to point out that by the end of 2022, because of Michigan's Renewable Portfolio Standard, we are going to have over 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy developed in our state. And this is a breakdown of the makeup of the renewable energy generators that are online right now in Michigan. And this was taken from our REC tracking and certification system. You can see that wind is the bulk of it, but a few years ago, solar was less than 1%. So now it's showing up as 3%. So that's a good thing. And I'm really excited to share some preliminary data from the distributed generation and legacy net metering reports that were filed by utilities just last week. We have gone over 10,000 customers participating. So, and Tom remembers when we worked on these numbers together, gosh, we had less than 100, and it just seemed like it was growing so slow, but now we have over 10,000 customers participating, and the total capacity participating is nearly 90 megawatts, and that's significant. And a new thing that is happening is battery storage. We have over 4,000 kilowatts of battery storage in the DG program. The next few slides are going to cover the Mpsd's role in moving the clean energy train forward. So Mark wanted me to talk about why change to utility tariffs and programs can seem to happen really slowly. To provide a picture of how things happen at the Mpsd, I put together just a few slides. So please bear with me. Sometimes this utility regulatory stuff, administrative stuff can be kind of boring, but I'll try to make it painless. This slide shows the typical activities used by the Mpsd to carry out its mission. So the first one is talking about laws, public acts. The Mpsd only has the authority conferred from the legislature. And I know in other states it's different. In other states, the Public Utility Commission has a lot more ability to set policy and do things. But here, we can only do what the legislature gives us authority to do. And the two public acts shown on this slide, Public Act 295 and Public Act 3, these are the key public acts related to clean energy. And changes to the regulatory provisions included in these public acts, it generally requires the laws to be amended. An example of change that I know GLREA has been working on very hard for several years is increasing the distributed generation cap. Bills have been introduced to address this in several different years, but they haven't passed. Sometimes before a new law is passed, the governor or the legislature will ask the commission to do a study to inform the process. And we've been asked to do a study to look at distributed generation, and that is underway, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. But as a precursor to the Renewable Portfolio Standard, then Governor Granholm directed the commission to do a study in 2006 and 2007 called the 21st Century Energy Plan. And that really looked at the impact, the cost impact, and the system impact of Renewable Portfolio Standard. And I believe that was a key part that helped the legislature get comfortable with the 2008 package of energy bills that included the RPS. So once we have the laws in place so we can do our work, then we have administrative proceedings that lead to the commission issuing orders. And these are formal proceedings with an administrative law judge, lawyers and expert witnesses and legal briefs to create a record that the three commissioners will use to make their decision on the case. And commission decisions are presented in a document called an order. And commission orders are subject to appeal. And GLREA has been very involved in clean energy issues in our rate cases, in renewable energy, and voluntary green pricing cases. And I can't remember if GLREA was involved in integrated resource planning or not. But
yes, we were.
You were, okay, all right. And then sometimes GLREA members will file a formal complaint if they want to bring something before the commission. And another aspect of utility regulation is administrative rules. And rulemaking it's very difficult, and it takes a very long time. And it feels like by the time the rules go into place, it feels like you really need to just start over or start revising them and do a new rulemaking process. I wish it didn't take so long, but they tell us that it takes a year, but I have one that's going to be longer than 2 years. It's just not flexible or nimble, but it does carry the weight of law, and there are benefits to having things in rules. And some of the common Mpsd rule sets that GLREA members may be involved with are technical standards for electric service and our interconnection rules. So this is the rulemaking process I was talking about on the last slide. The interconnection rules were last updated in 2009. And we knew we needed to do a massive rewrite of our interconnection rules because everything has changed. So we spent over a year holding 10 stakeholder meetings to develop this draft rule set, and it's more than 50 pages. And right now we're working with our regulatory affairs officer to get the rules to a point where they can move on to their next step. But this part has taken 5 months. And then there's 2 other groups that have to review. And then we can issue the order and begin the formal comment part of getting these rules in place. And I have this chart where I try to guess when the new rules might go into effect, and it's looking like July 2022 could be when the new rules go into effect. So another tool in the Mpsd's regulatory toolkit are stakeholder processes. And some issues that are just too complex to handle in a time-limited contested case are better handled by having stakeholder processes where we hold meetings and talk about the issues and gather input from lots of perspectives. And the Mpsd has a huge stakeholder effort underway called My Power Grid. And this is needed because we're at the beginning of a major shift in things like data availability with the way the grid is being monitored, smart meters, increasing distributed generation. And we want to move forward in the smartest way possible. And the initiative consists of education, outreach, and regulatory reforms. And my favorite part of this is the stakeholder meetings have been incredible. We've been able to get wonderful speakers from national labs, utilities, clean energy businesses, trade associations, environmental and advocacy groups too. So it's been really great. And I noticed when I saw the names of all the people that joined this meeting tonight, quite a few of them, I've seen their names in the attendee list for the My Power Grid meetings. So we really appreciate the effort. So there's 3 parts to My Power Grid. And the first part is customer engagement. And we really need customers to become more involved in energy technologies and price signals and be more active in this transition to clean energy. And one of the work groups that might be of interest to GLREA members is it's called Distributed Energy Resources Rate Design. And that just started. And this is really addressing the request in Senate Resolution 142. And the study that's going to be done by this work group is going to look at how customers with DERs use the grid now and into the future and different approaches to rate design and cost allocation. And thankfully, the commission hired an outside group to do this research, and they hired the Regulatory Assistance Project, or RAP, and they're going to facilitate all the work groups and do the study. And we expect the draft report to be issued in September and the final report in October. And the second part of My Power Grid is integrating emerging technologies. And this is one where I've been really involved because the interconnection rules fall under this. And we had, like I said, we had 10 stakeholder meetings. And another work group that's really interesting is new technologies and business models. And I think there's a total of 10 meetings in this, and we're about halfway through, and each meeting focuses on a different topic. And one that I really enjoyed was the solar focused one. And it looked at behind the meter solar and community solar. And I moderated a panel on behind the meter solar, and John Freeman participated on the panel as a panelist. And it got a little feisty, and And it might be interesting to go back and watch the recording. And the third part of my power grid is optimizing grid performance and investments. And this is just really looking at how, in order to optimize going forward, we really have to consider supply, distribution, and transmission. It's all got to be studied together in order to get the best result for Michigan's future. And it's very interesting to talk about how we can do this. So opportunities for GLREA involvement. GLREA members have been very active, and I've seen them in our stakeholder meetings, and they're filing expert testimony in rate cases, filing briefs. There's been a lot of involvement. But I wanted to point out that if you're not interested in like participating in a case, all of these My Power Grid meetings that have happened over the last year have been recorded. And it's really easy to go to the website and watch some of the recordings. I think that some of the presentations are really worth going back and watching. And I really wanted to wrap up by talking about how I think things are going great, and the clean energy train, it's moving, it's not stopping. And I feel very optimistic for Michigan's clean energy future, and I'm excited about it. What is next? Well, the development of all the renewable energy projects needed to achieve the 15% by 2021 renewable portfolio standard, they're wrapping up. It's pretty well done. So growth in renewable energy is going to come from other areas now. And an area that we're seeing tremendous growth in is voluntary green pricing programs. For example, DTE is requesting commission approval to add 800 megawatts of new renewables to meet the needs of its voluntary green pricing programs. And they indicate that they have more, that they might have even more need, and consumers is probably going to be building more renewables for their voluntary green pricing programs too. So that's an area where growth will continue. But really where I expect the bulk of the future growth to be is in as supply for meeting customer load as part of utility integrated resource plans. We've had, well, let me step back and say that integrated resource planning looks at anticipated customer electric needs over the next 5, 10, and 15 years, as well as what's the appropriate mix of resources to serve those needs. And the first round of integrated resource plans has concluded, and I admit I was a little surprised at how renewables were basically mostly what was selected. When consumers came in with their integrated resource plan, and it included 6,000 megawatts of utility scale solar, I practically fell off my chair. I didn't see that coming. That was really a turning point for me to see how well renewables and solar can stack up against traditional sources of generation. And I'm looking forward to consumers filing their next integrated resource plan in July. So it'll be interesting to see if they have made any changes to their plan going forward. So these are all reasons for having tremendous optimism for the future of clean energy. it just feels to me like we're going down this path and we're not stopping. So thank you. And I wanted to include some links to reports and areas of our website that you might find interesting. And if you have any issues with finding things on our website, please email me. I'd be happy to just tell you where it is, because our website has a lot of information, and even I have trouble finding things sometimes. So thank you.
Excellent, Julie. That's really great. Thank you so much. You just hit the stop button on the bottom of your page, stop sharing, and we'll go back to this. Great, outstanding. Great job, Julie. Again, if you have a question, oh, people are doing this already. So Charles Morris has his hand up. So Charles, unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, two questions, just two brief questions. First of all, one question is climate change, the cost of climate change, treated as an externality by the Mpsd in their deliberations, or is that factored some way? That's question number one. Question number two, kind of related, is that you've got the governor and the president talking about carbon neutrality by 2050. The utilities, on the other hand, are going, gung-ho about gas, and certainly compared to coal, gas is less bad, but it's not clean, much less is not carbon neutral. So how do you address those two questions?
Good questions.
Yeah, those are good questions. And I can tell you that externalities like the costs of climate change that are not borne, that utilities don't pay for now. I don't see them being reflected in programs right now. I think we might need some direction from the legislature on that, but I can tell you that groups are really pushing for that. GLREA is one of them, and environmental groups are pushing that too. So if there's a way we can do it without legislation, I'm sure it'll be in front of the commission, and they'll have an opportunity to weigh in on it.
Please remember to mute.
And then I'm trying to think. The other question was about natural gas plants.
Spoke to GMA today. It's crazy that they can just convict you.
Bob Stegmeyer, you have to mute.
Here on this residential street in Hollywood.
Great. Okay. So the other question was about gas plants. Okay.
He's been fighting to see the video. The they in their mind are the judge of the jury.
That worked. Okay. We are starting to have some concerns about reliability. And batteries are not, we don't have a lot of experience with batteries yet. So I think there's reluctance on the part of regulators to push hard to not have natural gas generation because it's dispatchable, and we want to make sure that we have reliable service first. But the one thing about the integrated resource plans, Father Charles, is that they're filed like every 3 to 5 years, and they look out a long way. And I think we're a ways out from having so much renewables that we have reliability issues. So hopefully there'll be better solutions as time goes forward. So I hope that answered your question. Mark, you're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight something you just said about reliability. Our presenter last month talked about utilities, and they were saying specifically that adding significantly more renewables was a problem because of the unreliability of renewable energy. And it based on some questions, it became obvious that the reliability issue had to do more with centralized solar than decentralized solar. That when a cloud goes over a 10 megawatt solar array, yeah, you got reliability problems, but rarely does that happen on distributed solar. So one could make the case that distributed solar, an optimum mix of centralized and distributed solar, is the way to achieve reliability. Is that being looked at or discussed? I mean, is that?
We're not looking at it yet because that is kind of new research. We had the people that did the wisdom model that looked at all the benefits of distributed generation. They came in and they presented at the commission, and it was really eye-opening. Our utilities don't use that model yet, and I think we know that research and that thinking is out there, and I'm hoping that we can factor that in the not too distant future. But I mean, like, I just listened to a presentation with MISO where they were presenting it's called Rea Renewable Integration something study, and they were, I'm sure Tom knows exactly what it's called, but they were saying there's a lot that can be done. We can add renewables, but for some of the renewable futures that they modeled, we need to do a lot of transmission build out, or there's a lot of things that have to happen in order to make sure that we can reliably serve customers every hour of every day.
With that, John Mirsky, I think you were next up.
Thank you, Julie. I'm wondering if you're familiar with the report that the Sierra Club put out together, was done by a university, I think in the UC, University of California system, called The Dirty Truth. Are you familiar with that?
Has that been out for a while?
That came out just in maybe the last 2 or 3 months.
Oh, no, I haven't read it yet.
So they looked at the 50, I'll call them worst in terms of clean utilities in the United States. And they looked at how their integrated resource plans lined up with their commitments in terms of decarbonization. And they scored those 50 utilities. The average rating, I think, was 17 on a scale of 100. And that was largely because many of the utilities were scoring 0. Of interest to this group, I think, is DTE. DTE scored 22 out of 100. And I was wondering if you were familiar with it and the methodology, because that would tend to run contrary to what I was pleased to hear was a rather positive assessment of what's going on in Michigan. But this analysis by this California group together with the Sierra Club really pointed to something very, very different.
So it looks like there's going to be a lot of renewable construction in the future. So I still feel hopeful. And the question is just, I think, how long before we can close the gas plants? And I don't know when that's going to be, but I really think renewables are going to continue to be constructed, and hopefully we'll get some battery storage that is at a scale that makes a difference also.
Thank you. Good question, John.
Real quickly, if I can add one other thing real quickly. DTE just also made the New York Times the other day. They did not pay any taxes in 2018, 2019, and 2020, even though they made over $4 billion in profits. And they said that this helps them deliver low rates to their customers, even though we know that rates in Michigan are lower than just about every other state in the Midwest. So somehow things, at least from my perspective, and there's a lot of other people that know a lot more than I do, but something doesn't quite add up right, it seems to me. So,
well, they're building all renewable, and they get a 30% tax credit on all of this renewable energy they're building, and I'm sure that's a big factor in them not paying taxes. So, I don't know what to say. It's not right. I think they should have to pay something.
Yeah, I got a 30% tax credit on my solar system, and I still have.
Yeah, same here.
Feng Wei Wu, you're up next. Mute, please ask your question.
Thank you. Yeah, Julie, thank you. I've attended multiple Mpsd workshops and learned a lot from those workshops. And because City of Ann Arbor, we are designing some programs to support deep energy efficient improvement and the projects related with electrification. So we found, like in Michigan, we don't have any statewide like incentive programs to support those programs. And as for DTE, we noticed you will get more energy efficiency rebate if you stay with natural gas appliances. If you do all electric building, you will get less rebate from them. So we are thinking, have Mpsd considered like set up a state program to incentivize electrification and fuel switch. Like some states, they have for EVs, you will have state tax credit, or some like state-run program like Efficiency Maine. They provide a series of energy efficiency support to incentivize fuel switch, carbon reduction. So I would like to know at Michigan, if we wanted to have that kind of policy happen here, who had the authority to do that, and who we should talk to start with.
So fuel electrification, and that involves fuel switching from natural gas to electricity. That is something that we've talked about this a lot amongst the staff, and we may need legislation in order, if this is something that people want to do, because we're the state regulatory agency, and if we're pushing people with natural gas who get their natural gas from one utility to buy more electricity from another utility, it puts the commission in a really odd spot. And so if we can legislation or direction from the legislature, I think may be needed in order for this to happen.
That's good. Well, I think we have our homework to do on that one. Great question. John Miner, you're up.
Actually, it's Mindy Miner. I'm the one with the question, but I wanted to know if you think that there is any way that we can reach carbon neutrality by 2050 without more distributed energy, because we've got all these electric vehicles coming online and that sort of thing. Do you think utilities can provide enough renewable energy without more distributed energy?
That's a really good question. Consumers Energy's integrated resource plan that had 6,000 megawatts of solar being added, that was still only about 45% renewable. Mm. So there's a long way to go. And if we're going to be carbon neutral, I think we need to start making that be the outcome of the integrated resource plans, and and model for that. And the governor's executive directive of being carbon neutral by 2050, that is now part of, it's going to be a scenario that consumers models and they'll be presenting that in their June filing. But it's going to be like a more robust modeling run in the later IRPs that other utilities file. So we'll be looking at that.
Larry Kerber, you're up. Unmute, Larry. Larry, unmute.
I'm doing it there. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so Julie, when I look at the various stakeholders that are out there, you know, I think of personally being a ratepayer, and you know, I see how powerful the utilities are, and I know the Michigan Public Service Commission is an organization that cannot help balance that power with the legislation, the legislative process being, I wouldn't say totally dysfunctional, but certainly struggling a lot of the times. But what I really want to know is what role the Michigan Public Service Commission plays as it relates to this influence of our legislative system and the destructive impact of dirty money influencing ratepayers. I mean, the deck is already stacked in the utilities' favor because they're so huge and so powerful. But when they use this money to buy our politicians, when they use this money to buy this dark money to spread lies, it puts us in a very difficult situation. What role does the Michigan Public Service Commission have in that? I know they fined consumers because they smeared Gary Glenn several years ago. It seems to me that you have the power. The question is, will you use it?
Well, I don't know if we have the power, and to be honest, you know, that is way above my pay grade. I know that when legislation is introduced, typically the commission will take a neutral position. We don't very often support legislation or say we don't support legislation unless, like when I'm asked to review legislation and provide input to management, they tell me to look at it as, can you do this administratively? Can you put together a program that can carry out this legislation, or is there something unworkable in it? So I think, you know, just generally as a regulatory agency, we don't have the ability to get involved with the legislature.
Pretty good. I know you don't like the answer to that, Larry, but
no.
Something that GLREA should probably look at in the future, what we can do legislatively.
Well, there's also the case, though, of what they're saying is accurate or not. And if they're making statements that are inaccurate, and the expertise of the Michigan Public Service Commission can be brought to bear on that, seems like it would be a worthwhile thing to do. Hold them accountable for what they actually say. Thank you.
Point. Dale, you're up.
All right, Julie, thanks for being on. I'm kind of new to this policy stuff, and just a couple things that strike me as I'm kind of learning the lay of the land here. To me, it makes a lot of sense to put solar on roofs versus on farm fields. And I'm wondering, you know, is there anything in legislations or in regulation through your committee that looks at the value of putting it on roofs versus on farmland? To me, it seems like every time I drive down the road and I see a wide open field with a new building going up with no solar on the roof, it kind of makes me sick. No shade, perfect place. You know, could we start writing into, you know, building code or something that any new building has to be designed in a way that the roof is oriented properly for solar? I guess anything in the works along those lines. And then the second question, the idea of dispatchable storage came up. And you know, we've got batteries coming online for houses, but the one that's really moving fast and really has the most kilowatt hours of potential is the whole electric car boom that's coming. And we've got lots of automobile manufacturers right here in Michigan. Are we talking to them about ways to to make that storage dispatchable, perhaps by the utilities, perhaps with consumer consent, you know, perhaps with warranty, whatever. But to me, that's a huge opportunity for dispatchable storage that could level the load for the utilities and help them to utilize their generation capacity more effectively. So kind of those two things, rooftops versus fields and dispatchable storage.
Okay, well, I'll start with the EV topic. And yes, the Mpsd has an electric vehicle internal group, and Karen Gould heads that up. And we have people who talk to the auto companies and the utilities about vehicle to grid, different ways to utilize car batteries in the future. It's not really showing up yet in any like cases we work on because it's not commercially available yet. But when it is, I'm sure that there'll be programs for it, and because that has a huge opportunity to help shave the peaks, and it can make a big difference in the way we use the distribution system. And with the communications and the electronic controls, the sky's the limit with what we can do with that in the future. So yes, there are people looking at it, but it's so far out that we're not really doing anything with it yet. Okay. And then I wanted to say, with regard to solar rooftops, if I'm remembering right, in the first iteration of integrated resource plans, I don't think any utility really had any like rooftop solar included as any kind of a resource. And I think that could change. And I'm sure they just looked at it and said, well, we only have to offer, you know, distributed generation up to basically 0.75% of our peak load, and that's not really enough to make a difference. So why would we include it? And but if it looks like the policy might change, or if that's one aspect, or if this new wisdom modeling that shows the benefit of distributed solar, if that somehow leads utilities and other people who participate in the IRPs to look at more rooftops, it could happen. I'm not sure it'll show up in this 2021 and 2022 round of integrated resource plans, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next one it did.
John Richter, you are up.
Yes, hi. I've got a question for you and then kind of a comment you can respond to. So the question is about PURPA. So that was on one of your early slides, but you didn't really say a whole lot about it. And it seems to me like PURPA isn't doing a whole lot in Michigan anymore. And it seems like the utilities are holding that up with various administrative hurdles that they're posing. So that's kind of one. And the other was you talked about the need for reliability and therefore probably continued gas plants. And I'd just like to make an enormous distinction between gas peaker plants, which ensure reliability at a low cost, and plants like the blue water plant that DTE is constructing. That's a combined cycle plant that's really designed to be a base load plant. And in my mind, those kind of get mixed together. People talk about gas plants, but it's a world of difference. So to you, Julie.
Okay, thanks. That's a good point. So what was your first comment that I'm supposed to talk about?
Yeah, PURPA.
PURPA. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yes. So we did actually get 584 megawatts of PURPA with consumers energy in a settlement. So that's pretty amazing. And that's gonna make a difference. And I think DTE is still figuring out what they're gonna do with the they're supposed to do something with all of the projects in their queue. But really, FERC issued another order in under PURPA, and I mean, I think it really is going to have it impacts the economics of PURPA, because basically the order said that it's perfectly fine to just use locational marginal price as the avoided energy cost. And that's 2 or 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And then there's a capacity payment, but if a utility uses a really good competitive procurement mechanism, then the avoided capacity cost is going to be 0. So I don't see a lot of PURPA development unless, as Secretary Granholm said, that DOE is able to reduce the cost of solar. I don't know, what did she say, 2 or 3 cents? Get it down to 2 or 3 cents, so, or even less. So if that happens, then maybe we'll have a lot of solar development.
The other part, John, of your question? Didn't you have 2 parts? You're on muted, John.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, so the other part had to do with gas plants, Julie, and the distinction between peaking plants and combined cycle baseload plants.
Yeah, and that is not an area that I spend a lot of time working in. I'm not like you, John, where you know everything about everything. So we have another group that works, 2 other groups that work on that area. But I do know, I saw that in the MISO modeling today, that there are concerns about that there are several hours in days that there are reliability concerns when renewables get up to like 40%. So, you know, if we can figure out a way to manage that, then great. And I mean, I would be surprised if consumers and DTE built more gas plants after this. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Well, consumers has an RFP out to buy a gas plant. But
yeah, to buy an existing one.
Yep.
Yeah. So could we quote you, Julie, about John Richter? He knows everything about everything.
You can say that, yeah.
On our logo. John Richter works here. Leandri, you're up.
Leaving that impression, that's all.
Leandri, you're up. Take your mute off and ask your question.
Yeah, so my comment follows up with what John was just talking about. It's my understanding that those combined cycle plants can cycle at 40 megawatts per minute. So you put in a 700 megawatt plant, it can increase its rate or decrease its rate at about 40 megawatts per minute. Mm-hmm. And the things that I see and hear from Europe are that if you have good cameras on the sky, you can watch the clouds move. If you have distributed power with windmills, you can see the wind move.
Right.
And so the idea that we can't dispatch this stuff, but we can predict it within.
Did we lose you? We may have lost Lee. All right, Julie, do you want to make a comment about what Lee was saying?
Well, I mean, I think he is right, and DTE has talked quite a bit
15 to 20 minutes, or quite a bit longer.
Lee, are you back?
I'm back now. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, that's okay. But you make a really good point about DTE's gas plant, blue water gas plant, and the fact that it is going to, as they say, enable more renewables, because it's more load following than an older gas plant. And yeah, we'll have this gas plant.
Yeah, so I'm not defending it. I'm not defending it. but because of the efficiencies, you know, at 60% thermal efficiency, it would be very difficult it'd be much easier for me to defend that plant than it would be a bunch of a single cycle gas turbines at 25 to 30% efficiency.
Right. All right, we have one more question. Julie Roth, you're up.
Yeah, hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
I have two questions / comments. One is, you mentioned in your talk the study that's being commissioned by the Mpsd, but then you didn't really elaborate on it. I'm wondering if you could, and what is likely to happen as a result of what you find in that study? That's number one. And number two, like, what, in other words, what is that going to inform truly? And number two is, I wanted to follow up more on kind of what Larry Kerber was saying, which is that I'm also new to the policy world, but to me, the Mpsd is a regulatory agency for the utility companies. And if the utility companies are spreading things that are demonstrably untrue with a whole lot of our money being used to do that, that's just really frustrating. And we don't have the power or the money to be able to counter those untruths. But it seems to me that the regulatory agency should, like, it seems like that would be part of what you're for. So again, I'm new, and forgive me if that's naive, but those are my two questions. One is about the study, and one is about the role of the Mpsd in countering untruths.
Well, I'll take the second one first. And for example, Chair Scripps testified before the I think it was the House Energy and Technology Committee about a month ago about the distributed generation bill and the change to remove the cap. And he provided testimony. We all worked on helping put those slides together, and he went and he presented that. And I think that's how the commission provides information, and hopefully what our chairman says carries a lot of weight. And I would think that you know, if the utilities are saying something that's not true, I would hope that the legislators would, you know, kind of take it with a grain of salt, and hopefully they would give more weight to what the Public Service Commission is saying, because we are supposed to be a neutral body.
So I'm sorry, as someone just wrote in the chat, we, you know, our utilities are lobbyists. You know, they are purchasing our legislators. We see that all the time, right? I mean, they help people get primaried when they don't vote in support of them. They have a lot of power because they have a lot of money, and it doesn't seem like we have any way to counter that. It feels very powerless. Like nobody's regulating them. Nobody is willing to stand up to them and say, you can't lobby like that. You can't throw your money around like that, because I mean, their lies are showing up in my Facebook feed, you know? So I don't know.
So to be fair to Julie, she works at the Public Service Commission, and I think her early slides showed what authority the Mpsd has, and this is not an area where they have authority to regulate. So it is frustrating that our ratepayer.
Mark, that's not exactly true.
Well, Julie doesn't have that authority. Okay, so.
But the Public Service Commission a couple of years ago did chastise Consumers Energy for their expenditure of dark money, and and consumers agreed not to spend it for a year or two. So I think obviously Julie is not a commissioner, but I do think the commission has some ability to oversee the spending of these utilities.
John, I have a question about that ruling. Did somebody bring that issue up in a rate case so the commission had a chance to, you know, review everything and reach a decision, because, you know, that's kind of how the commission speaks. So if somebody were to have evidence in a rate case, then it's possible something could happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Julie, how it came about, but it happened right after the primary election where Representative Glenn lost in his primary to the Senate, and then Tom Barrett was on the wrong end of ads by consumers. So there were a couple of cases. So, and it was a negotiated settlement, and those discussions were never made public. It was just a pronouncement. So it's unclear. And the part that was, and this speaks to Julie Roth, the part that was really disconcerting is the fact that the consumers did agree not to spend dark money for a year or two. But then a few days later, Brendan Hoffmeister went out publicly and said, well, this applied to Consumers Energy, but not to the holding company, not to the parent company. So it was kind of wiggling out from the slap on the wrist they got. So it was a bit disconcerting, but I'll stop there and let Julie finish. Thank you.
So the last thing was about the study that RAP is doing. Yeah, the Senate Resolution 142, I think it was, they issued this resolution because they wanted to have information so they could take up a future bill about the cap on the distributed generation program. And so things that they want the commission to look at are things that were talked about a lot in 2016 when the energy package of bills was being negotiated. You might remember that, I think it was the utilities, they wanted a DG customer charge, like a fixed charge added to the bills every month for people that installed DG, or they wanted minimum bills, or they felt that customers were not paying their fair share toward maintaining the grid. So I think this study will be looking at that, and we'll be looking at how utility costs are allocated. And that's what I think this study is going to be about. There's an outline of the report. It's available on the website for that working group. But I think the study will be really interesting. It's not going to actually have a final recommendation, is my understanding. I think it's going to look at a lot of different ways to set rates and allocate costs, and then just put it out there for the legislature and the commission to review.
And do you know what the timeline is on that, when that expects to be done?
Yep, we think that a draft of the report will be issued in September, and there will be an opportunity for stakeholders to comment. And then after that, the final report will be issued. I think it's got to be issued at the end of October.
So one of our clean energy seminars is going to be dedicated specifically to that report. And John Richters and I are talking about when we're going to be doing that, but probably this fall sometime. So that's then. So Julie, I want to thank you so very much. It was a great talk. It's a great capstone to our trajectory on where we're coming from the industry's perspective, the utilities and the state government. I think we've got lots to talk about internally, including with John Freeman, about how do we address this whole issue of dark money, and where should we be putting more emphasis, because it obviously is something that's critically important and frustrates us all. We're going to be having a presentation from Julie Roth, who was on tonight giving questions. She's going to be up here in the next month, I think. Is it month? April or May? It's April. April. The rest of the sessions going forward will be how do we speed up this clean energy train? What can we do given the framework that we've heard about from the industry, the utilities and stuff? Where's the sweet spot? I'm a firm believer in Sun Tzu, and you attack the enemy where the weakness is, and the weakness in this enemy is distributed generation. Ann Arbor has put 1 megawatts worth of distributed generation power in place over the last year, due primarily to Julie Roth. She put together a very high-powered program in Ann Arbor, so drawing on the best practices of vehicle all over the country, and it is working extraordinarily well in Ann Arbor, and she's going to be talking about that. She also has put together a program to hand this program over to other communities anywhere in Michigan, so they can replicate the model. And it's a supplier-based model. It works with the solar installers and brings to them ready-made qualified customers in groups where we make it easy for them to offer discounts to that. Now Julie will be speaking about that, and we're looking forward to that going forward. John Freeman, you got anything else you would like to say?
No, I just want to thank Julie for coming this evening. I think we've all enjoyed it. Let's give her a big round of applause or thumbs up. And we really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate your commitment to helping expand renewable energy in Michigan.
Thank you. I love coming and talking to you guys.
We'll be back. Believe me, we'll have you back.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone.
All right, everybody.